Hello, and I'm Nina Kelly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. And I'd like, if I may, to take you through two chapters of my book. It's an autobiography entitled Rising from the Fire, and this is actually chapters 35 and chapters 40. And I really hope that it's going to be of comfort and inspiration for those of you who've been brave enough to be treading out into the unknown and developing your own enterprises. So chapter 35 is about my passion and helping young people navigate through life. And there's an Oprah Winfrey quote which says, "Every time you state what you want or believe, you're the first to hear it. It's a message to both you and others about what you think is possible. Don't put a ceiling on yourself." And this quote from Oprah Winfrey was one of 10 from assorted inspirational people that I instilled into the young people I delivered my Entrepreneurs for Good program to. And that was a social enterprise I was running, and I ran it for 2 years. I developed it, just so you know, to enable young people to rise above the limitations and the poor beliefs that were, I felt, being unwittingly instilled into them via our education system in some ways. The education system was developed hundreds of years ago when the world was a very different place. So it's not anyone's fault, it's just that times have changed. So, I put forward the thought that if even Oprah, from a very disadvantaged and poor family, with a very tough life, who was raped and pregnant at 14, could achieve great things, then and use her money to help others, then so could they. So the program was really driven by my own angst and despondency as I watched my own children negotiate the school system. It pained me because my school had given me a much needed sense of belonging when I was younger. It gave me social stimulation, it gave me physical and mental challenge, and they didn't really seem to be getting that. The government Ofsted targets seemed to dominate the school curriculum, reaching maths, English, science targets, ranked schools, as we know, from inadequate to outstanding. And of course, numeracy and literacy is extremely important, but it seems the way it was taught was possibly more suited to the Victorian age and squashed free thought in many ways. So I was immensely frustrated and also sad to see how it stole the life out of my otherwise happy, independent and lively youngsters. And I'm guessing that, like you, running your enterprises, that you've been stimulated as well by some problem you've seen in society that you want to change. So my thoughts naturally turn to what I could do to help address issues in the education system for the next generation. I'd always loved youth work and readily volunteered to go on youth weekends away, help out at youth clubs, getting alongside young people wherever I could throughout my 20s, my 30s, my 40s. I loved it. It wasn't something I found a chore. I actually found the energy, the honesty, the curiosity, and the desire of young people to push the boundaries to be stimulating and actually quite fun. So when my eldest son turned 11, I started volunteering at the youth group he had begun going to. I also put myself forward as a candidate to be a parent governor at my children's secondary school. And although being a governor was an interesting learning experience, I felt powerless to achieve any form of real change in that role, as it was primarily about governance, policies, financial oversight, obviously, which is needed. But then the government launched an initiative seeking to attract people outside of the education system with expertise in areas such as finance and HR or estates management to bring change to the system. And I applied to gain a place on this diploma, School Business Management. And honestly, I never expected to hear back. And to my surprise, I got an interview, subsequently a place on the course. Beside me at our inaugural dinner were ex-army officers, ex-city financiers, people from industry who had overseen large building programs. And then there was me. I was, at the time, a part-time charity worker, but a woman with a passion and a vision. So, successful acceptance onto this cohort meant obtaining a school placement. By the time I finally found one, I was 3 months behind the rest of my DSM cohort, who had all started the previous September. So I raced to get my assignments completed in time. I conducted qualitative, quantitative research with parents, presenting the findings, analysing the results, drawing conclusions, developing a proposed way forward, and juggling my studies with my job as an international charity worker, plus caring for my 2 children still at home, plus an additional foster child. And it took late nights working until midnight, and also 6 a.m. pre-work starts to get it done. But against the odds, I completed that first module, went on to complete the whole diploma. Now, you'd have thought that would be plain sailing then, wouldn't it? Once I'd received my DSBM qualification, the head teachers would be only too happy to have me working with them, or so I thought, but I was wrong. I applied for every school business manager job available within a 60-mile radius and obtained 12 interviews, often getting second interviews, shortlisted to the last few. Each time, though, they appointed either an internal applicant or someone more interested in maintaining the status quo rather than shaking it. I knew I had to give up my dream of working with young people and just apply for any job I could find, really. So I got a full-time 12-month contract developing the Hampshire School for Social Entrepreneurs with Action Hampshire back in 2013. And I had to quickly work out, of course, what a social entrepreneur was. But I got the job, I enjoyed the challenge of doing something completely new and different. And at this point, I was still struggling with the menopause, which left me with many forms of debilitating physical symptoms and actually intense exhaustion. But I pressed on, believing it would pass. And for me, it did after about 12 months, although I know for others, my symptoms and worse can carry on for a lot longer. But after the Action Hampshire contract finished, I still had a huge drive to do something, enabling teenagers to understand their passions and harness them to create a fulfilling future. So I started my own social enterprise in April 2014. I called it Entrepreneurs for Good. And I successfully obtained and negotiated a commission with Hampshire County Council for children who were on the edge of care. I got another commission with the sixth form college. I got some lecturing slots with Southampton University, Winchester Universities. However, my enterprise really, frankly, didn't make enough money to provide a living. But I did, however, hold on to my dream of helping angry, scared, confused teenagers become confident, composed and purposeful young people, and started to look for other charities working in this field who I could get a job with. And so that really leads me on then to my whole journey where I'm still at, actually working with Safe New Futures. And there's a quote from Louis Pasteur who says, "In the field of observation, chance favours only the prepared mind." Louis Pasteur is, of course, the French microbiologist and chemist. And so the phrase, "fortune favours the prepared mind," is a paraphrase that sort of came out of his saying and sums up my experience since I first joined the charity, Southampton Action for Employment, SAFE, as it was then known, in September 2015. The first thing I did was to set up a trading arm. I called it Choices Training and Development Limited in November 2015. Now, this was partly to incorporate my Entrepreneurs for Good program, but primarily to fund the Southampton Action for Employment charity. Given a backdrop of increasing difficulty for the charity surviving on grants from trusts and foundations, and the pulling of local council funding led to a £54,000 deficit in the year before I joined. And also, I have to admit that when I analysed the charity and its operations, I realised that the business model was deeply flawed. It was dependent on one-off project grants, which didn't cover back office costs or infrastructure. Another reason for setting up the trading arm, CT and Daily Choices, call it for short, was that in the event the ship did sink, we could still market the training programs as a commercial enterprise and salvage what we could. Thankfully, the ship didn't sink, so this is the next part of the story, really. In October 2015, I called an extraordinary general meeting of the trustee board to explain the issues. One trustee who had interviewed me just a couple of months earlier promptly resigned, not wishing to go down with the sinking ship for various good reasons, actually, and two others who resigned shortly after that. The exception was the chair of trustees, who really stood firm on deck to man the pumps. He agreed to stay on 1 extra year, even though his time had come to an end. And so, that was really good to have him to have that support at that time. But thinking I would still have to close the charity down, ensure the charity duties were discharged, I was astonished when I actually saw the training programs we were running in action. And they just changed lives. It was incredible. And there was a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy with vocational-based programs. And I realized I could not allow this program to be just buried in the deep. So, the previous CEO, Nigel, had actually done a great job in setting up the charity, getting the program researched, getting funding to get it that far. So my first job really was to move away from piecemeal project funding and apply for 3-year continuous grants. And some very generous foundations came to our rescue, and we ended up getting national lottery funding for 3 years, so that was fabulous. And so we knew that we had a good solid base to move forward with, which was just super. It helped us to weather the storms, it carried us forward, and of course there were continuing budget cuts in Southampton City Council. So all the charities really in our area, most of them weren't able to keep operating. Somehow we were, and we survived, which was just fabulous. And I had to think a little bit outside the box and develop a 3-day course rather than a 10-day course. So this was the start of our commercial enterprise, really, which then went on to sell into companies. But the charity was, really absorbing so much of my attention. I wasn't able to develop the trading arm very much, but I did get an interview with the customer services manager at Old Mutual Wealth and managed to get a really lucrative commission, which again kept the company afloat for the next year or so. Then, of course, March 2020, the pandemic abruptly stopped all our face-to-face training, both the corporate training plus the training we were doing for unemployed people. But what kept us going was really a vision we'd had 3 years prior to that, where we had a vision to go national. And going national probably meant running the programs online. So quickly, within a day, I was able to change the charity into an online format. And I can actually trace this day back to the 17th of March, which was St. Patrick's Day, 2020. I was boarding the last rescue flight out of the Spanish state of emergency, which they declared 4 days previously, just in fact as I was in the air on the plane. And the trip itself had been a last-minute emergency one to see my ill brother. But I was flooded with relief when I set foot on the passenger boarding bridge for the flight back home. And then just as I did, my phone rang. It was one of my trainers informing me that we would have to suspend all our training programs because our offices were being closed, along with the training room. I only had time to say to him, do you know what, we're going to carry on, we're going to make virtual delivery work. And it was out of the question, of course, I felt that we would abandon our candidates at the hour of their greatest need. So First thing the next morning, I gained access to our offices, collected up all our computers, our laptops, drove them out to people, enlisted Wana, who's my training manager still is, to transition all the programs across, and she did so very ably. And we put in all sorts of different measures, SurveyMonkeys, internet access for the most disadvantaged candidates, to make sure that we were able to keep going as effectively online, and even things like soft phones to record conversations. And the end result of all of that is that we grew from helping around 90 candidates each year before the pandemic to 214 in the year 2021, which was a staggering growth. It was also a challenge. It was lonely, it was difficult, but we got through. And when I look back, do I feel that all the training and the interviews I did to become a school business manager were a failure? I absolutely don't, because it led me on to my next step. And do I think that all the energy and passion I put into developing my social enterprise, Entrepreneurs for Good, was a waste? Again, I absolutely don't, as it gave me invaluable experience to do what I've been doing with Safe New Futures for the past 8 years. And have I given up on my dream to see young people discover their passions? Again, no. Interestingly, even in the past few weeks, I've been speaking to people with access to government funding who want to help address the massive mental health issues that so many young people are struggling with post-pandemic. But my philosophy is, and always has been, to see every setback as a learning lesson. So I think that the best encouragement I can offer you today is to say, wherever you are in life or in your social enterprises, just keep moving forward. Never be afraid to move on from things that have been good learning experiences but have perhaps had their day. Never be afraid to keep moving forward. I do hope this has been of some help, and please do feel free to chat to me. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but my email address is nina.kelly@safe.org.uk if you do want to get in touch, and all the very best to you.